Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Noel, and I've got a great guest joining me from Florida, Katie, who's an expert on issues around schooling and children's experience of schooling. And we were just talking just before the show, there are some similar types of issues going on in terms of numbers of children not going to school for various reasons, increasing in both countries. There will be similar reasons and also distinct reasons, but it seems to be a transcultural issue that kids are struggling in school at the moment, and we're struggling to understand those struggles and do something about it. So we're going to be talking about that and about Katie and her career. And that's enough from me. But if you've got any comments to make, remember my number is 07506 319 745. Do drop me a WhatsApp and ask questions, etc. Don't call me though if you're watching the show because it's pre-recorded, so I might be in bed when you see it. Send me a message. No calls. All right. All right. Katie, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for
I
having
hope
me.
your air conditioning is working over
It
there.
is working. It is very hot, very humid. Yes, welcome to Florida.
Yeah,
Yep.
I did that thing of I went to Florida once. I flew in. I've been to Florida a few times, but this one, the first time I went, and they opened the doors of the aeroplane, and we immediately the whole flight started sweating as the
Yes,
humid heat rushed in.
yes. Sometimes it's hard to even breathe.
It was really quite challenging. I'd ordered for that particular trip, which was my first time there. I didn't know what I was doing. The hire car, I thought I'll get a nice sporty car with a drop-down roof. Of course, I'd never had the roof down. It was far too hot, and I needed the air con. So I had it up all the time. Still a nice
Yep.
sporty car. Welcome. What time is it where you are at the moment?
It is 11 o'clock.
In the morning. So, okay,
Yes, in the morning. Yep.
that's great. And you're not originally a native of Florida, are you?
I am not. I am born, raised in Chicago, Illinois. So I am a Cubs fan through and through.
Yeah, well, also a fan of cold weather.
Yes. Yeah.
We-
That's why I'm in Florida right now.
That's
Yeah.
right. Exactly.
50 years of the cold and
Uh,
I'm
I had
done with
enough of that.
the
So
ice.
tell me
Yep.
about you. You grew up in Chicago. Tell me about that. What was that
I
sort of?
did. I grew up, I was born and raised in Chicago, grew up on the northwest side of the city, went to school in the Chicago Public Schools area, loved being in the city. Then, went to college, did all that kind of stuff, and then moved out to the suburbs, not far from the city, about 35 minutes or so from the city, and a town called Naperville.
Right.
So I raised my children and taught in Naperville.
And you had a big family, small family. I tend
I
to
have
think
two
of you as
kids.
having some sort of Irish connection somehow. Is that?
Yeah, I have two kids.
Ah,
So I grew up, or my kids grew up in the suburbs of the city where I grew up in the city.
yeah.
And that's where I taught. I taught for 25 years at Naperville North High School.
Okay. So you were a teacher by training. Is that where you
I
studied at
was,
college?
well, in a roundabout way. So I
Okay.
started in marketing. I was one of
Sort of the
those
same thing, I would say.
kind of a little bit sales,
Trying to sell knowledge to kids, convince
Well,
them they
it
want
was one
something
of
they're sure they don't want.
Right. It was one of those things where I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grow up.
Okay.
I mean, it was at 18 years old, I went through every kind of major there was. I mean, I thought, oh, I'll be a nurse. No, I didn't do well in chemistry. Then I thought, oh, I love horses. So maybe I'll do equine sciences, which was crazy of me, a city girl thinking I was going
Yeah,
to
quite.
help
So the
with horses.
stables down the road.
Yeah, right. I didn't know what I wanted.
Yeah.
I loved literature, so I kept taking English courses.
Uh-huh.
And people kept saying to me, "You love working with students. You should be a teacher." And I literally said, "Absolutely not. I will never be a teacher. I will never have those bratty kids ruin my love for literature." I mean, that's really what I would say all the time. Even though I loved working with kids, I just kept saying, "No, I will never be a teacher. Nope, nope." So I got a degree. I quit college actually for a while because I thought, oh, I fell in love. I got married. Who needs school? Went into marketing and then realized, oh yeah, by the way, you do need a degree.
Yeah.
One of those things. You need a college degree.
Mhm.
So I went back to school once I had my daughter and went into the college admissions and said, I just need to get a degree. What can I get a degree in? And she said, well, you keep taking these English classes. I went, oh, well, I love English. I love taking literature and writing courses. She said, just, you can major in that. And I went, you can?
Yeah, right.
You can get a degree in English? What? I thought you had to do something, with
Practical.
a
Yeah, that's right.
career. And she goes, you can have a career. So I got my degree in English and went back into marketing and did marketing for about 10 years.
Mhm.
And I was working at a bank, and a mission statement came across my desk for the bank. They had just redone their mission statement. And the mission statement said, our mission is to make our shareholders basically more money.
Mhm.
And I sat there and I thought, that's not my mission.
Quite.
That's that's why I work so hard every day. That's why I drop my daughter off at 6 in the morning and
Yeah, right.
barely get there at 6:30 to pick her up from daycare, is to make some person that's really rich richer.
Yeah.
So it was a real life crisis for me.
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, this isn't what I want. This
It's
isn't
interesting
all
that
those people
I'm just
who said,
thinking with the person who thought up that mission statement for that bank, I don't imagine they thought this is what would happen with it. You know what I mean? It's like the staff would read it and go, nah.
right, right.
Thanks for telling us. We're going
I
thanks,
mean,
bud.
it really hit me. It really hit me hard.
That's great. That's great.
And I remember I was, taking the train downtown Chicago every day. I was commuting an hour. And I remember just sitting there thinking, this is not what I want. This is not my mission in life.
Yeah.
And I thought I, I got to do something. I got to do something.
Yeah.
So I thought all those people who kept saying to me, maybe you should go into teaching. Maybe they were right. And this was back when they said there was going to be a teacher shortage way back when.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll look into some programs. And there were some programs where you could work full time and go to school at night to get a master's degree in teaching.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I got my degree and I went into teaching, and I never looked back. It was the best decision I ever made. Though all those people who said you should
Right.
go into teaching, they were actually right. I should have listened to them years ago,
Yeah.
but
But
never
yeah,
looked
your
back.
own journey. And it's interesting, I think, isn't it? When we discover what our purpose is, our meaning. In marketing terms, they often marketeers will call me and say, do you want some help? And they, we'll help you find your why. Will you? What about my X and Z? I'm usually quite annoying to them. But finding your purpose or your meaning is really important, I think. And
It is.
you had that sort of existential crisis, if you like, no, that isn't my purpose. And why do you think you fought it off? What was it about? Have you
I
thought
think
about
that
that?
it's a great question, because even when I was a kid, I would always play teacher. I always had my stuffed animals and I would set them up and I would teach them. And I think it was the the idea that that's not what everybody was telling me that's what I should do, and I wasn't going to do what everybody was telling me I needed to do. It was
Just
that rebellious spirit in me.
okay.
Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah. Well, that's quite useful training, isn't it, in terms of working with kids?
Well, you know
Because
what? And I think that I wasn't ready for it anyway. I really
right,
think that some of the young teachers who are coming out, that education of experience is so valuable.
yeah, yeah.
What I learned in the world was so incredible. I can't trade that.
I agree because what we're finding in the UK, it's a relatively common problem, is that we're training teachers and they're doing a couple of years and then leaving, and discovering it isn't for them. So,
Mhm.
and it's also, I think it is a tough job these days in the UK.
Oh,
Probably
it
one
is
of
in the
the
United
more
States too.
difficult jobs to do. I'm presuming similarly in the US, it's quite a challenging environment to be a teacher at the moment.
Very. It's very challenging. I mean, it's safety reasons, behavioral reasons, engagement reasons, political reasons. We have education departments in colleges that are shutting down because people just are not going into it.
Yeah, and we see it here in the UK, but just sort of politicians sticking their nose in the classroom
Mhm.
where it's not wanted, to be honest, and sort of extremism happening.
Right.
We've just started some new anti-extremism courses in our schools because recently there were some riots by people who've had very extreme views, and so
Hmm.
now having to teach children what fake news looks like, what extremism
Right,
lies are,
right,
so they understand it. It's necessary to do, and I'm glad we are.
right.
But back when you started, what was teaching like? What was it like then, and what is it like now?
It's incredibly different. And it's one of the reasons why I do what I do now,
Right.
because I've seen over 25 years what a huge difference teaching, um, what a huge difference students have gone through. I mean, even you think about when we were young
Yeah.
and how we were taught. A lot of things haven't changed, honestly, but what's changed is the world.
Mm.
So we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computers. I mean, I was taught how to type on a typewriter.
Yeah.
There wasn't this access, this instant access to information. Whenever I teach my students how to do research, I always show them pictures of a library and how I had to go through
Yeah.
microfiche.
Yes.
Like, what is that? Those big, huge machines that we had to go and look through. How we would have the card catalogs that we would pull out and we'd go through all the cards and then we'd have to go. Like I show them what that was, like how we did research
Mhm.
back in the 1980s. And they're always amazed.
Mhm.
But yet we're still teaching the same way we taught back then.
Yeah.
And so I think that that is what has been so interesting to me, even how I taught when I started in 2000s compared to when I was leaving
Mhm.
and retiring. It is things haven't changed, but yet we have to start changing because technology has changed. Kids now have computers in front of them. We're all one to one. We're battling the cell phones all the time. I always tell my students the story about how I got a paperback and when I was a student and I got an A on the paper and I showed it to my father and I was so proud of it. And my dad read the paper and went, "This is not A worthy." Went into the teacher and said, "This is not an A. Look at these spelling mistakes. Look at these grammar mistakes. Why would you give her an A on this? This is probably more like a C." Can you imagine a parent today doing that?
No.
Now I
No.
give a C
Not at
and the
all.
parent comes in and says, "Why is this not an A?"
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Right? So those kinds of things have so changed since we were kids, let alone how has this changed even in the 20, 25 years of me being in the classroom?
So is that something about the culture of the relationship between parents and teachers have changed and the way
I think
or
it's
the
parents,
whole
but I also think,
society? What
yeah,
would you
I
say?
think it's also with the kids.
Right.
Because it's when I started teaching, there were the relationship between the kids and the students was there was such a great rapport. Um, Kids were much more trusting. They wanted that relationship. They communicated so much more.
Mm.
Where now kids are coming into the classroom, they're on their devices. They're not even talking with each other, so they're definitely not talking to me. And they're leaving the classroom on their devices.
Mm.
So that face-to-face communication is not there. The building of the rapport is not there.
Mhm.
That trusting relationship is not there.
Mhm.
So a lot of that has changed. So that building of the community, that
Yeah.
engagement is lacking.
Mm.
So I think that is absolutely taking a huge impact into then why am I even coming to class? Um, just give me the information that I need to pass the test and then let me go.
Mm. And is that social change or is it the fragmentation of communities? Because certainly when I was in school, and I'm a dinosaur, I'll put my hand up now and say that, but that we had a strong identification with the school and he had a culture and a spirit, and it was very much part of that. And it was very much part of the local community. And I do see that happening where I live now. There are facilities that schools provide that the local community use and some invest in that and some don't. But certainly, my school was a hub of the local community, and people would come and they would put on events, lots of after-school events, lots of sports, lots of plays, lots of things, and it was a sort of real. hub of connection. And I would say my parents had a lot of respect for school, and a lot of respect for teachers and education and learning. So that's where we're coming from. What would you say it's like now in comparison to that?
I would say it's 50-50.
Okay.
So I would say that 25 years ago, it was a hub. Um, and I worked within the theater department. I sponsored theater.
Yeah.
Football games were packed, and they still are. Sports still is incredibly important in any community, and they parents and students are still at the sports events.
Mhm.
I would say that a lot of the community events are still somewhat attended,
Right.
but the school spirit is not as vibrant as
Mm.
it once was.
Mm.
It is very much more of a transactional type of atmosphere in
Yeah.
schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what makes me
An ex
sad.
of mine is a university lecturer, and she talked about the shift in culture in terms of students coming to university and going from talking about course content and it being interested in that to talking about what job they could get after doing her course. And she said that that was quite a significant cultural shift that she'd experienced. Is that the sort of transactionality that you're talking about? What will this get me?
Right, right. What will this get me? What college is it going to get me into?
Okay. So
Okay.
kids have a sort of defined pathway. They know where they're going and they want to know whether you fit in. And I guess the converse is true that some kids just know there is no pathway for them. So what's the point?
So what's the point?
Right.
Right. Why am I even here? I'm not going to college.
Yeah.
So why do I have to be here?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I think that is one of the number one things right now when we talk about engagement
Yeah.
and the chronic absenteeism. Why am I learning what I'm learning? How is this going to help me in the world? This
Mhm.
has absolutely no relevancy to me.
Mhm.
I don't want to be here. I don't care.
Mhm.
It's out.
Mhm. I mean, one of the things that's been interesting on this side of the pond is that, I mean, I've watched young people and I'm really impressed by young people, I have to say. I think they're extraordinary. Their learning, their growth. And I think they're much broader minded than I was as a kid, to be honest. And they deal with much bigger pressures than I did, without a doubt. I mean, I think, and this whole sort of online experience, I'm not negative about online experience. I think it's new. I think it's here to stay, and we need to learn to manage it. That's all. So I think Brazil is leading the world at the moment. Well done, Brazil. And just saying, no,
Mhm.
I'm not having this shit. Sort of, I'm shutting you down unless you observe some common decency and laws. Get out of my country. I mean, fair enough, I think. Um, but I have a lot of respect for young people, and they deal with a lot of issues. But I've watched the pressure grow upon them and grow upon them. And I've watched, for example, in the UK, we've seen the numbers of children getting good academic qualifications has over the years increase and increase and increase and increase. It's normal now to get A stars and A star pluses and all of that. Even though there's a bit of a gender divide, boys are not doing so well. I presume that's the same in the US as well. We haven't cracked that one. But as the kids have been achieving more, what I'm seeing is what we call them gammon stakes. These are angry white men who are on the telly, right?
Yep.
And we call them gammon, and they just seem to be putting these kids down, no matter
Yes.
what they do. And like there's objective evidence that kids are working much harder and
Oh,
achieving much more than ever before.
ever.
Absolute objective evidence, and yet still people are really negative about them. And I sort
Yes.
of I just don't get it. I don't get it. Is it similar in the US? Is similar things happen?
Yes. Yes. And in fact, a lot of times when I meet with parents, I will say to them, tell me what getting into college, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, yeah.
And they will say, oh, this is what I did. And I'll say, same for me. I walked in on a Saturday and my teacher said, oh, listen, come in on this Saturday. You just need to take this one test. I didn't even know what it was. It was, oh, it's called the ACT. Oh, okay. And you filled out one application, you
Yeah,
wrote it out in pen. There's a one single sheet,
yeah.
right? And that was it. You went into college. And then I will say to parents, now look at what your child has to do to get into college. Resumes, test prep. They take the test over and over again. They start prepping years
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Huge resumes with what they're doing for service learning,
Yeah.
the amount of weighted classes that they're taking,
Yeah.
the amount of pressure. So I try and show parents the differences between what we had to do compared to what they now are doing.
Yeah.
It is a vast, vast difference. The amount
Well,
of pressure they have on them is
objectively, when I went to school, there were only two people from my school of 2,000 students that went to university, me and my friend, because it
right.
was not the norm. And so, that was it. And these days, of course, if you go to university, school, as you would call it, um, you've got thunderous debts to pay off. It's sort of like
Tremendous. Tremendous.
incredibly expensive to go into education. So I understand why kids would say, what job am I going to get? Because I've got $20,000 or $40,000 to pay off at the end of this. Why
Right.
have we been putting pressure on these kids? Where has it come from, do you think, in your experience? Having been
I
in
think it's
the system,
society.
is it?
I do. I think, if you look too at the job market, a
Yeah,
lot of it is this expectation that you're going to go to college,
yeah.
right? The trade schools, there's nothing wrong with going to a trade school, but yet in our world, I feel like there is this expectation that if you don't go to college, why did you not go to college?
Yeah.
What is wrong? What happened? Um, you know, it's really a sad state where there's so much that you can do. There's so many other options out there for you,
Mhm.
and it's okay if you don't go to college. Like
Yeah.
you said, there were two in your class, and that was okay,
So
right? Not
in my
in,
school, not my class, the
oh,
whole
in
school,
your school,
the
right?
whole
Sure.
school, absolutely. Yeah,
And in mine, that it was higher in the 80s, but it was still okay if you didn't go on to college.
yeah, yeah,
Now it is expected that you go to college,
yeah. And
right? And
these
so
days, I hear from young people, it's not just one degree they're expected, because everybody's got a degree. You've now got to go on to graduate school or postgraduate studies, get your MA, etc. Um, what has this done to kids, do you think, in your experience, having viewed it? Because you come from that, you've seen it as it's happened. And I suppose we all thought getting more qualifications was a good idea, and I guess it is a good idea. But what has happened within the culture of schools and education and for kids, and what are the consequences, do you think?
this increase in depression, the increase in anxiety,
Yeah.
and I want to go back a little bit to my story where I was 18 years old and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. How, what a huge expectation it is to say to an 18-year-old,
Yeah.
decide what your major is right now and what you're going to do for the rest of your life. At 18,
Mm.
I was 30 when I finally went into teaching. It took me that long to finally figure out, oh, this is what I want to do. Even I was just this morning on the phone with my daughter who is 30, and
Mm.
she was saying to me, Mom, I don't know what I want. I'm thinking that I might want to go into teaching. But on that same instance, she said to me that everybody I talk to says to me, don't do it. She said, you're the only one who says, no, I think it's a good decision.
Mm.
But she said, I'm having almost a crisis in my life right now because I'm thinking, what am I doing? What is my life about? Well, that makes sense at 30. But
Mm.
at 18, we're saying to these kids,
That's right. I agree.
what do
I
you want to do for the rest of your life? You have to make a decision right now. Choose a major.
mm.
That
I wonder
that's
if it,
incredible pressure.
yeah, I wonder if it's why we're surprised if we're putting this pressure on what our kids, children still, and I know at 18 you're an adult, but you're not.
Right,
Sorry. It's not really. You're legally, but not really.
right.
Um, and I guess that is leading to the sort of crisis and problems that we're seeing. Now, I know in the US you have specific issues that we don't face in the UK around the types of violence that's going on. So
Mhm.
just talk about that and then come back to these main themes, because I think it is important, given what happened yesterday,
Right. This
that there
yesterday.
was yet another school shooting.
Right,
So, I mean, it seems incomprehensible to me
right.
that one should be in a school and be worried about whether or not somebody's going to come in with a gun and kill you. It's
Right.
just I can't wrap my head around it. So
Right.
can you try and help us understand this? What is it like?
I wish I could. I wish I wish I could help you understand it because I don't understand it, right? I don't think anybody understands it. I mean, he was a 14-year-old, and we still have a lot of questions that are unanswered as to why. But I think we always do. Any of these school shootings, we're wondering why. And a lot of times we come to the blame game, right? As we do with everything. Well, okay, we're going to blame the parents. We're going to blame mental health issues. We're going to blame the school district. We're going to blame society. We're going to blame the Second Amendment. We're going to blame, there's so many different things, especially in the US, we're going to blame. We don't have the answers. We just
Mhm,
know that school should be a place where you can go and feel safe.
mhm,
It just should be.
mhm.
And it makes no sense to me that a 14-year-old feels the need to come in and start shooting up teachers, shooting up fellow students. I mean, right now we have two teachers that are dead and two students that are dead
Yeah,
as a result. It
yeah.
just it makes no sense. And so then the pressure that is being put on these students, the trauma now, the fear, and then the teachers.
Mm,
And in fact, this morning I go for a walk with a bunch of women in the morning this morning, and
mm,
were asking me, "What would you have done?" And I said, "As a teacher, we went through training in our
mm,
school every year. We went through training of active shooter training,
mhm.
and how sad it is that we had to do this every
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
But as a teacher, I would have absolutely thrown my body on top of my students. That's how we were. That's who we are, right? As a teacher, but how sad that that's part of the profession.
Yeah, I mean, it's incomprehensible. I just cannot imagine being in that environment. And I go to America quite a lot. I do have to say, last time I was there, which was last summer, I was there and in California, and I did have a moment, and it seems maybe because it's been projected more on the news, but I was going through one of those big shopping malls that you have in the US, which are like a city to us. Sort of. And then at one point I went, oh, this is where those strange people with guns come and shoot you.
Mhm.
And I did. And I just suddenly went, whoa, I need to leave. And that was the closest I got to it. I mean, I guess
Right,
from my perspective, having worked a lot with kids, kids have rages and they have troubles and they have troubles managing themselves. And my feeling is we shouldn't give them the means to be able to
right,
act upon that
right,
because they need to learn to manage stuff. And
right,
it's, I guess my answer to it, why does it happen? Because they can. If they didn't have the means,
right,
then I can't see that it would be happening.
right,
And the only time it's happened in the UK when some children were killed in Scotland in a Scottish school, we just took away the means from people to be able to do that.
right.
And I guess the world looks at it like that,
Mhm.
says, but you have your own culture, and I'm just interested in how you manage it as a teacher. I mean, but I guess you can't be worried about it every day because you'd freeze. You wouldn't be able to
Right.
function.
You would. And I think that that goes back to a lot of the issues with what's going on in America and our education system,
Right.
and the crisis that we're really having. Because I think there is this boredom and this lack of why am I here?
Yeah.
What is the purpose? This, and you had mentioned it earlier too. You had said something about respect, that
Yeah.
you said your parents really respected
Oh,
teachers.
without
Your parents
yeah.
respected the
Oh, if
education
I
system.
if I'd have upset my teachers, I would have packed my bags and left home. So like it would not have been worth going home.
Right.
Honestly, not at all.
And that is not happening anymore.
Right.
That respect is not there. So if it is,
Where did
um,
it go, Katie?
I would, gosh, if I knew, I'd go back and get it.
Yeah.
But if I knew where it was, I'd grab it. It it is, I just seen it slowly go, and I can't put my finger on what triggered it, what happened. It just has slowly gone away.
Right.
It it is not, it is again, I'm going to go back to this blame game. No
Hmm.
one wants to take responsibilities. It's that not my child. It started back in the 80s, I would say, the stranger danger. Everybody has, like, I need to wrap my child in a bubble,
Yeah.
right? Um, we need to be careful, watch out. When I was a kid, man, I could go do anything.
Hmm.
My parents gave me a dollar's worth of quarters so I could use the payphone.
Hmm.
And but then all of a sudden it became this stranger danger, right? We were all so worried about what was going to happen to our children. Rightfully so. But then I think this fear started to arise in our culture,
Hmm.
and we wanted to protect our children so much so that we stopped teaching them problem solving skills.
Hmm.
We stopped teaching them how to react in difficult situations. We just wrapped them up in bubble wrap.
Hmm.
And I think that that just started going higher and higher and higher so that parents started to say, I'll take care of it for you, honey.
Yeah,
Don't
I've
worry about it.
heard that described before. I remember somebody described it in this way. She said that, I mean, there's a lot of pressure, I think, on parents. If something happens to your child, God forbid, you're going to feel
Mhm.
awful as a parent. But what society does to you on top of that is even worse because you will automatically be attacked. And I think about, there's a famous case in the UK of two parents who their daughter was kidnapped while they were on holiday. And significant portions of the world blame them for it. And
Mhm.
it's quite clear that a predatory paedophile got hold of their child and has done it to other children. And there was nothing they could do about it. That's
Right,
what, but we tend to sort of then point the finger, don't we?
right.
And certainly this woman was describing how, when she was growing up, it was her parents said to her, "You're going to get the bus and you need to navigate your way to school." They had a
Mhm.
car, but they wouldn't do it. These days, unless it's a designated school bus, I think a lot of parents are really afraid of doing that and they make sure they take their kids in the car. And
Right,
it has consequences, doesn't it, in terms of these skills of social interaction, problem solving, dealing with anxiety,
right,
um, moving out into the world, and the expectations as well of the children and the parents. And
right.
there has been, I think, in the UK, not just a diminishing of respect for teachers, but I think there's been diminishing of respect for many professionals, to be honest,
Right.
and a diminishing of respect for actual knowledge. Um,
Yes,
and it's almost like opinion has become knowledge, and it isn't.
yes,
An opinion is an opinion. It's not knowledge, and
right.
it's certainly not evidence, and it's certainly not. And I wonder what the influence there is of these sort of Google and social media
Yes,
and stuff like that, and if that's something you've experienced as well.
yes. And that is why I am such a huge advocate for thinking.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
we
Yes.
can
Yeah.
get our generation, the any generation to start thinking for themselves.
Yeah.
I talk to teachers all over, and that when you were talking about what I've seen as a difference in my classroom, it was the decline in thinking.
Right.
So, and the decline in what I love the term productive struggle.
Yeah.
So it's the joy of learning, the joy of this is a hard problem. Let me see if I can solve this, to I'm just going to Google it and see what everybody else says, and I'm just going to do what everybody else says, and I don't have to think for myself.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem because and you said and I absolutely agree with you earlier. You said how you this generation is great. Youth are they're amazing.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
this generation today is phenomenal. They want to take action. They want to get involved in politics. They want to solve the world problems. What's frustrating them is that they go into school and they can't get involved because they have this set curriculum. There's a great study that just came out from
Yeah.
PISA just did a whole study on creative thinking, and it was a 5-year
Yeah.
study. And one of the most remarkable things is that it said that kids love to be creative thinkers, but as soon as they get into school, they know they can't be.
Yeah. Yeah.
That-
And that's
Right there, that's the
the
problem.
control of curriculum is sort of a significant issue, I think,
Right,
in the UK as well. I mean, what we see, particularly like if we think about Florida at the moment, there's been interventions in what books are allowed,
right.
which is quite shocking. I mean, it's
Yes.
sort of like, hang on, I think we dealt with that in the 1930s in another country. Sort of
Right,
seriously. And again, that sort of political intervention determining
right,
what is allowed to be learned and what is not. And whilst all of us, I guess, as parents and members of society are worried about things like radicalization and extremism, and we should be, at the same time, my belief is education overcomes those things. That's the whole point of education.
exactly.
It broadens people's mind. It makes things complex, not simple. And the
Right,
more complex things are, the less extreme people tend to be, in my experience. And creative
exactly.
thinkers who can imagine what somebody else is experiencing and then relate it to themselves, and then imagine somebody else's experience and relate it to them, are less likely to need to hide away in an extreme, in my
Right,
experience. So,
right. Right. And that's where you need that creative thinker and that critical thinker. So let me see what is your perspective. Let me hear you. Let me listen to you. Right. I might not agree with you, and that's okay because I'm
yeah,
critically now thinking, here's what I know, here's what I found, here's the information that I found, and this is my now what I have deduced, and here's what I have
yeah,
discerned,
yeah.
and this is my opinion. I might be different, I might think differently, but I have an empathetic way of
Yeah.
thinking of things. But
And
that's what's
certainly,
missing.
And certainly the school I went to when I was growing up very much promoted that idea of multiplicity, of diversity, of being able to think outside your own personal box and understand other people, and really promoted the skills of knowledge acquisition, making a good argument, and
Yes.
presenting that good argument, and seeing them as skills, not as my identity. Sort
Right.
of like,
Right.
it's not me. This is stuff I've
Right.
learned, and I'm really excited by the schools, the skills, and the tools.
Right.
And that's how it was viewed, as opposed to if you don't understand what I'm saying, you're attacking me somehow. And it was
Correct.
never, in
And I'm
fact,
going to defriend you.
yeah,
I'm now not your friend anymore. I
yeah,
won't talk to you. You are now, right? So I think that's happening. And because the curriculum is becoming so scripted,
yeah.
I am giving you, it's this transaction that I talked about earlier of like, here's the knowledge as a teacher, here's the knowledge I'm giving you, student. This is the one way you have to think. And I am, as a teacher, not allowed to give you some of these other perspectives because
I mean, I think that's the
I
issue.
could be fined.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's some states now that are fining you as a
Yeah.
teacher. If you talk about this, you could get in a lot of trouble.
It's
Um,
really interesting. I was thinking about my English teacher at school when I was doing what are called A levels, which are a particular aspect of post-16 education. So it's the exams you do prior to going to university in the UK. They're the ones that determine entry into university. And he was teaching us the English syllabus, and he gave us a folder. He said, "This is what you need to learn to pass the exam, and this is what you have to learn to pass the exam. And we're going to learn this in blocks in the class, and then we're going to learn for the rest of the class. And we're going to debate and look at literature, and we're going to look at these writers. We're going to deconstruct them. We're going to get inside their heads and see whether we agree." And that's how he did it. He understood that there was a transaction, and he treated us, I guess, as adults and said, "Here's the transaction, but here's what learning is." And he was allowed to do that. And is anybody surprised that we all did very well in his class? No, because we felt valued as human beings. And what you're saying is there's almost no opportunity to do that now as a teacher. They have very little freedom to be
right,
able to do that with students.
right. I was talking to one math teacher not too long ago who said that her principal expects to walk around all the fifth grade math teachers and see that every single fifth grade math teacher is on the exact same slide at the
No,
exact same time. And I thought, that is just, that's
completely
horrible.
wrong.
I mean,
It's
it's completely wrong way of teaching our
yeah,
students because it's
the wrong way of doing anything. That's like
right,
Henry Ford Model T make
right,
the same car, isn't it? That's ridiculous. Why would
Right.
anybody want that as an expectation? I really don't understand.
Right. Well, and again, it goes back to the pressures that we're having in politically, parents, that transactional, here we go, we have a test. I need you to pass this test. Here are the skills that you're going to need. And again, going back to what you had asked me earlier too, is that so why would you show up for class then?
Yeah,
Why
correct.
would you be engaged?
Yeah,
Of course, you're going to be sitting on your phone.
yeah,
Of course, you're going to be talking to your friends. Of course,
yeah,
you're going to be bored out of your mind
yeah,
because I'm not learning anything that I'm going to need in real world situations.
yeah,
We've
yeah,
got to start changing that. And the other big thing too, I think going back to what's happening is with all of this is that there's so much pressure on kids to be perfect
yeah,
and to get the A's that kids don't have the chance to learn how to fail.
yeah.
Kids don't have the chance to learn how to take risks. So they don't
There's a
know
saying,
how,
isn't there? Perfection is the opposite of creative.
right. So they're
Perfection
not
is
getting the
freezing
chance.
people. Yeah. So another pressure, I think, another thing that's happening within education that is alienating children, and this is what we're talking about in the
Mhm.
UK, and I wonder if it's the same in the US, is this sort of culture war stuff that's going on. So
Right.
my understanding of young people these days is that they are really clever. They are doing much more than I. They're working much harder than I ever did when I was their age. They're really sussed about a lot of things. They're also very like if I look at young men and their exploration of what it means to be a young man, they're much more interesting than me. Do you know what I mean? So much further ahead than I was.
Mhm.
So much better in their understanding of their feelings and their
Mhm.
relationships, etc. And then we've got these issues going on around culture wars about gender identity and all this sort of stuff. And like as a clinician, I'm like, well, yeah, that's what happens. That's great, isn't it? And yet we have this sort of real sort of culture, political wars going on here about what is a tiny minority of children. I mean, trans children is less than a percentage. I mean, it's point something or something. Do you know what I mean? And
Right. Right.
but I don't think people understand that when you target a tiny minority like this and tell them that they're somehow devilish or bad or wrong, children can't distinguish who you're talking to. They just hear themselves being talked to as though they're bad or wrong because if they have any thoughts in their head that they might be something or other. Do you know what I mean? They
Right.
they
Yes.
immediately feel like they're targeted. All of them are targeted. Are there similar types of dynamics in the US? It seems to
Yes.
be there are.
Yes, absolutely. The exact same thing. And I think that that takes away the air in the room,
Yeah,
right? So it's those small things, much like you were saying, banned books, those, the transgender issues, that those are taking up so much of the air in the room
yeah,
that the really important large issues like chronic absenteeism, like engagement, the depression, anxiety, those are not getting the time needed to be addressed.
yeah, yeah.
And so we're failing our students, we're failing our
Pacing
teachers.
ourselves. So, in terms of how big is the absenteeism issue? I mean, it's big enough in the UK that they're looking at bringing in new policies and procedures. It was just being discussed in Parliament. I mean, it's a serious and significant
It's
issue.
serious here too.
Yeah. So, what types of things are you seeing happening in terms of are kids just leaving school, or what's actually happening?
They're just not showing up. They're
Right.
just not showing up. So and I saw that even before COVID. We love to blame COVID
Yeah, I
for
know. Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
We love to blame COVID for everything. But
Yeah.
I saw it happening even before. We used to have a 10-day absence cap. If you were out more than 10 days, you actually were dropped from my course.
Mhm.
Now, even before then, I'd have kids 15, 20 days, and they were still in my course. So it was a problem before COVID. Now I think what happened with COVID is students and parents started to see, oh, well, it doesn't really matter if you're in school or not, you still can get the A. And that's fine. I understand that because there's some students who don't need to do all that workshop, don't need to do all the different worksheets, don't need to, they actually get it. But what they're missing out on is the socialization. They're missing out on learning how to communicate. They're missing out on how to collaborate with students. They're missing out on how to work and solve difficult problems. And they are just not seeing that they need to be in class, so they're just not going to class.
Mm.
They're just not showing up. And parents are saying, oh, you're right. You don't need to be there.
Mhm.
Don't worry about it. I'll just call you out today.
Mhm. And so
And
in terms
that's
of,
a major problem.
yeah, in terms of you and what you're doing, I guess you're raising awareness of these issues, but also are you sort of working with parents and students in terms of like trying to support them in maybe finding alternatives or maybe getting back into the classroom? What are the sort of things that you're doing that you see happening which are good practice in this area?
So I'm working a lot with schools and teachers.
Okay.
So I'm really helping schools and teachers work on this problem. And a lot of this problem stems from building relationships and engagement and helping students see that school is relevant and meaningful.
Yeah.
One of the things I remember, I had a student who would be truant all the time to class. And I remember saying to him, why are you not coming to my class? And he said, it has nothing to do with you. And I said, it has everything to do with me.
Mhm.
I, I'm wondering why me? Why are you skipping my class? And he said, well, what, why are you taking it so personally? And I said, because there's a reason why you are choosing to not come to my class.
Mhm.
So I'm taking it a little personally. And
Mhm.
so it was an interesting rapport building because like there's a reason why you're not finding my class engaging. There's a reason why you're not finding what you're learning in my class important enough that you need to be here.
Yeah.
And that changed his perspective. And so he started coming to my class more because he started to see, oh, I get what you're saying. So I get why I need to be in your class.
So
And
from
that,
my perspective, that sounds like what you were doing is you were looking at the relationship with him and getting
yes,
him into a relationship with you as a person, which is what we know works in education.
right. Well, and I think he was also seeing that I cared enough to find out, to
Yeah.
get feedback from him as to how can I change class to make sure that I am meeting your needs.
So you're important to me and I want to
Right, right,
adapt to you. But
right. And I
you
do,
seem to be also sort of promoting this idea of having more creative approaches to what's going on, because
right.
both of us are horrified by the idea of these maths classes all being on the same slide, because that doesn't make
Right.
any sense at all.
Makes no sense. Right. And that is where I work with teachers quite a bit through what we
Right.
call the create method, which is really helping give students more choice, helping this idea of curiosity. One of the things that I've noticed and I've seen change is that, when kids are little, they're so curious and they want to know everything. But as
Yeah.
they get older, we suck the curiosity out of them
Yeah.
and we tell them to stop asking questions,
Yeah.
right? And so then again, why go to school if I can't ask questions, if I can't learn about things that I'm interested in,
Mhm.
I'm just going to sit at home and be on my computer and go to Wikipedia, Google, go to all those things where I can just get that instant access on my computer.
Yeah.
So we've got to start looking at what are our kids interested in? How can I encourage them to learn about things that they really want to learn about? That's how we're going to pull them in. I even as a teacher in literature, they're not going to be super interested in Shakespeare. I get that. Let's start where they're interested in. They want to learn about Harry Potter. Let's start with Harry Potter. They
Yeah,
want to learn
I get
about
it.
Batman.
I get it.
Great.
I
Let's learn
remember
about
it's
Batman.
I'd like to know more about the create method in just one second, but I'm going to describe something too. I think I know what your reaction will be. There was a
Okay.
woman, she was a drama teacher in the
Hmm.
UK, and she was working with hard to reach children. This is going way back in time. Like there were still literally dinosaurs roaming the earth when she was teaching, literally. And I remember because I was one of them. Um, Her name was Dorothy Hefker. She was a great influence on my training, my early training. Um, and she would use drama to teach every subject, literally.
Hmm.
And she would teach maths using drama techniques. She would teach English. She would teach everything. And it was all based on this idea of that. that knowledge is imparted because of the environment, the emotional, creative environment that you create, where learning is possible, where mistakes are possible, where all of this is allowed and it becomes fun and creative. And then whatever subject the subject is sort of unimportant as long as you have that structure. And then the subject just goes in and the students soak it up because
Yeah.
that's what we're designed to do. Neurologically, that's literally what we're designed to do. That's why our brains are the way they are.
Right.
But it has to be in this, and she described a particular type of environment. And it seems to me in create, you're looking at similar types of processes. She would talk
Exactly.
about you got to drop to the universal every single time. Don't get caught up in the specifics. Drop to the universal of the experience,
Yeah.
and then you'll find the connection. Then you go up into the specifics, but you
Right.
start down here on the basis. So tell me a bit more about create and how it works.
Right. Yeah. So, and that's exactly what we're trying to do is we're trying to help teachers have a method that will work K through 12.
Yeah,
So that with the create method, it really is just an acronym for creating an experience in your classroom where there's curiosity with
right.
your content, taking your content and making sure that there is this sense of what is it that your students are curious about, giving them some choice, letting your content really be guided by your students,
Yeah,
that there is then this risk taking with the R, this idea that students can take a risk without feeling the consequences,
yeah,
right? So students are so afraid because what if I get the F? What if my grade goes down?
yeah,
Allowing them to struggle, be challenged.
yeah.
You know, it's fun to try something new and it's okay to fail, and that's how we learn. But if they know that they're going to fail and then all of a sudden they're going to get
Well, their
grounded,
life's over these days. I mean, it's like
right? Oh
if
yeah.
you fail, that's it. Your whole career's gone, isn't it? It's like
Oh,
insane the pressure on
well,
kids.
and they think that in fourth grade,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's when they should be taking these risks and they should be trying.
yeah.
And so we really talk about, okay, what are ways that your students can take risks
Hmm.
and try something new and learn how to fail and celebrate that failure? Like, nice job, good job trying. You failed, and that's okay.
Yeah,
So learning that, the E really is for that experience. How can we make this experience hands-on? Let's get kind of dirty.
yeah,
Let's get, working in the mud and getting kids to create something, right? And then we really get into that social emotional with the A and the T. What is the attitude? How do we get that growth mindset? And how do we get kids to work in teams, not just groups? A
mhm,
lot of times we group our students, we want them to be teams. Everybody has a role. We all have different strengths and weaknesses. We got to work as a team. We got to be empathetic with each other. When we put kids in groups, a lot of times one student will be like, I'm going to do it all because I know I need to get the A. Just let me do it all and have it right.
mhm.
That's not a team player. So we got to teach our kids to have positive attitudes, respect each other, feel a sense of belonging. I hear this from teachers all the time that right now students are afraid to talk to each other because they're so afraid to be judged.
Mhm.
Not this open-mindedness. There's this, I don't want to say anything because immediately somebody will go, that's such a stupid idea. Why would you say that? And kids shut down. They're just shutting down in classrooms. They're not talking to each other because of that fear of judgment.
Mhm.
So we talk a lot about that. And then the last one we really talk about reflection and how that's such an important part. You had said earlier, and we talked earlier about how this generation loves to get involved, and they do. They want to take
Yeah,
action.
yeah,
They want to get involved. They want to take action. And that's an important part of the Create method is how can we say to our students, hey, look, this is a great idea. How can we go out into society and make a difference? Let's do it. Great idea. Let's take our learning and our knowledge and our thinking and now go in the community and make a difference with what we're doing. And now let's reflect on that. What worked? What didn't work? What could we do better? How do we evaluate what we just did? And so think about if we taught our students that way to really think in this creative and critical way, have them own what they're learning, and teachers become this activators of knowledge instead of this
yeah,
transactional way of learning.
yeah,
I would want to go to school.
yeah,
I want
yeah,
to
yeah.
be there. I would be super engaged.
I
I
already
can't,
want to be in school with you. That sounds like a lot of fun
I
to
can't wait to
me.
go to school, right?
That's right, exactly. But it seems like a a no-brainer really, but that's what needs to happen, isn't it? So you're creating educational environments in which it's okay to learn, it's okay to make relationships with people. And we know this, there's plenty of educational evidence now. We think about things
Right.
like expert groups of people. So I know in psychology now, when we want somebody to learn how to stay sober, we send them to groups of people who are already good at it. They're peer groups. We want somebody to learn how to manage diabetes. We send them to a group of people, their peers. They can be part of a team. They can learn from each other, you know. So we know that fundamentally, and it's really sad that we have taken away the creativity of teachers and
Mhm.
students.
Right.
And it does seem to me we need to put that back in.
Right.
You
Right.
know, you're a revolutionary subversive for suggesting these things,
I,
Katie.
I know. So I keep hearing I'm trying to start a revolution of thinking is what I keep
I
hearing.
know, but it's almost like we do need to come back that full
You
circle
do.
and get
You
back
do.
to this idea of how do we learn? Well, we learn with each other, don't we? How do we get the courage to go beyond the box that we're in? Because
Right.
we emotionally support each other and say
Right.
that's okay. It's
Right.
okay
And
to
it
be
shouldn't be in
different.
isolation. You had said earlier too about being students feel so isolated,
Yeah,
teenagers feel isolated. But you think about learning needs to be something we're doing together. You read a book, you are learning with the person that you are reading the book with, right? We learn better when we learn together. You and I today are learning together from each other.
absolutely.
And we're learning better because we're learning together.
Yeah,
Why are we saying go in a cubicle and learn and study by yourself? We should be learning together as a community and learning from each other and celebrating that.
yeah.
We're not, and
And I
that's,
think it has broader impacts as well, because
oh,
generally a human being that is more rounded is a safer, pro-social person who's unlikely to do antisocial things to their neighbours, etc., and more involved and more engaged.
mhm,
And I mean, I know some people are afraid of this idea of getting kids involved in sort of social action, but that's how we're going to save things if we
right,
don't. You know, we make
right,
kids afraid of this. What we get are kids shooting each other. What we get are people driving over each other. What we get are people angry and afraid of each other. And that has to stop. You know, we has to
right.
stop. We are at the end of the show. I told you it would fly by. How do people get hold of you, Katie? I guess this is going to really relate in terms of practical workshops with schools in America, but also I think, you know, British or folk might be
Anywhere,
interested if you've got any books or anything like that, and any resources,
right.
website, what's available so people can follow through.
Anywhere. Yeah. So as I say, I fly to work.
Yeah,
So I will go anywhere and speak at any schools. So I work online or I fly to schools and do workshops and speak at keynote speakers at Curiosity to Create, the number two, .org. My book called Deeper Thinking in the Classroom is coming out. We have a children's book called The Adventures of the Curious Creators Club that is online to help kids K through 5
yeah,
to learn how to think and problem solve. We have a community online that is launching where teachers can go on and
super.
support each other and have
Wonderful,
lesson plans. And we
wonderful.
just really want to I always say there's a huge power when educators come together
Yeah, yeah,
and support each
absolutely.
other.
I still remember my teachers, Eric, my English teacher from school, turned my life around.
Wow. Yeah, I think teachers can make
Absolutely,
such a
without
huge difference.
doubt. I mean, without that single person turned my life around. And I come from a very troubled childhood, but he fed my mind and taught me that when you start using your brain, the world is available to you.
So important
Such
to
a
learn that.
joy of knowledge and a love of
Mhm.
knowledge. And a shared love of English literature as well, by the sounds of it. So,
Yes. Yeah.
or any literature, I don't care what language
Any
it might be.
literature.
I don't care. A good story. There's an Irish saying, why let the truth get in the way of a good story?
Yeah,
So a good story is a good story, right? And
absolutely.
listening to a good story. I've had a good story today. Really appreciate you coming along.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
wonderful to hear from you. And amidst all of this doom and gloom, it's nice to come across somebody who's going, no, no, here's a solution. Let's get on with it. We can do this.
Yes, absolutely.
I totally agree with you. You stay there. Say goodbye to everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this show and allowed you to think about it. Do get hold of Katie and her resources because I think you'd find it fascinating and useful. And the more we join up together on this stuff, the better it is, to be honest. If we live in our isolated little bunkers and think it's too big for us, but we make these connections and then we can change the world. We really can for the better. So lovely to see you. Bye bye for now, folks, and I'll see you all at the next show. Thanks for being here.